This has to do with something more precious, which is, who are we as a country and what values do we stand for?
Tulsi Gabbard did not hold back when she set her sights on the legacy of former President Barack Obama, cutting through the reverence that often surrounds his name with a sharp and uncompromising critique. The moment was striking not only because of the directness of her words, but also because of the rarity of such candor from a figure who had once shared the Democratic Party stage with him. Gabbard's dismantling of Obama's record was not a casual swipe or a passing remark, but a carefully framed indictment, one that exposed deep tensions within the political landscape and invited a reevaluation of how his time in charge truly shaped the country. Her tone was steady, her focus unflinching, and the result was a moment that left both supporters and critics of Obama unsettled. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. What made this episode resonate so powerfully was the way Gabbard cut straight to the heart of Obama's image. For years, his presidency had been cloaked in the aura of optimism, his campaign slogans and soaring speeches remembered as symbolic of a generational shift. Gabbard's attack stripped that away and pointed instead to the contradictions, particularly in foreign policy, that defined much of his administration. By drawing attention to what she saw as failures masked by charisma, she forced a reassessment of the very narrative that had been carefully built during and after his time in office. Her words functioned like a lens, magnifying decisions that many preferred to overlook. Central to her criticism was the handling of war and military intervention. Gabbard, a military veteran herself, spoke from a position of authority on these matters, giving her perspective added weight. She reminded her audience that the Obama era was not one of peace, but one of continued conflict. Drone strikes expanded dramatically under his leadership, and military entanglements in regions such as the Middle East persisted, even as the public was promised de-escalation. By highlighting these points, Gabbard framed Obama not as a bringer of change, but as a caretaker of the very machinery of interventionist policy that so many Americans had grown weary of. The impact of her words rested on this sharp contrast between promise and delivery. She also underscored the human consequences of those choices. Civilian casualties, destabilization, and the ripple effects of intervention were all drawn into her critique. Instead of treating these as distant or abstract, she presented them as central failures of leadership. In doing so, she struck at the very moral credibility of Obama's administration, where his defenders often emphasized diplomatic finesse or a more tempered approach compared to his predecessor. Gabbard painted a picture of continuity rather than change, a presidency that operated within the same framework of military dominance while packaging it more attractively for public consumption. Her dismantling of Obama's legacy did not stop at foreign policy. Gabbard also pressed on the issue of trust and accountability within government. She argued that while Obama entered office riding a wave of enthusiasm for transparency and reform, the reality fell short. From surveillance policies to the handling of whistleblowers, she suggested that his administration had not lived up to the ideals it so confidently projected. This was more than a critique of specific policies. It was an attack on the authenticity of his leadership style. Gabbard's framing cast Obama not as a leader who failed due to external pressures, but as one who knowingly perpetuated systems he claimed to oppose. The boldness of Gabbard's remarks also lay in her willingness to confront the myth-making that follows former presidents. Once leaders leave office, their images are often softened, reshaped into symbols rather than scrutinized as decision-makers. By tearing into Obama's record with such clarity, she resisted that tendency and reminded her audience that the consequences of leadership endure long after the speeches have faded. Her words disrupted the comfortable distance that often develops with time, pulling Obama's presidency back into sharp focus and demanding that its shortcomings be addressed rather than forgotten. This moment was also revealing in what it suggested about Gabbard herself. By positioning her critique in such uncompromising terms, she distinguished her political voice from the chorus of cautious establishment figures. She framed herself as someone willing to confront uncomfortable truths, even when they involved a figure held in high regard by many in her own party. The effect was not only to challenge Obama's legacy, but also to highlight her own commitment to independence and principle over party loyalty. In this sense, Her attack was both an indictment and a declaration of her own political philosophy. The implications extended beyond Obama's record. Gabbard's critique served as a broader commentary on American politics and the gap between rhetoric and reality. By using Obama as the example, she illuminated how hope and change could be wielded as slogans while the underlying structures of power remained intact. Her words implied that the problem was not just one leader, but a system that rewarded image over substance. This message struck deeply at the foundations of trust in political institutions and raised uncomfortable questions about how leaders are judged. Her dismantling of Obama's image also had the effect of reshaping the conversation within the Democratic Party. Obama's legacy had often been treated as untouchable, a standard against which others were measured. Gabbard broke that pattern by refusing to treat his record as sacred. This created space for others to reconsider how his presidency should be remembered. It also underscored the generational and ideological tensions within the party, with Gabbard representing a challenge to the established consensus. The moment was not just about Obama, but about the future direction of Democratic politics and the willingness to question its most celebrated figures. The sharpness of her critique raised questions about the nature of leadership itself. By highlighting the dissonance between words and actions, Gabbard underscored the importance of consistency and integrity in governance. Her attack implied that the true measure of leadership lies not in speeches or symbolism, but in the tangible consequences of decisions. This perspective cut through much of the nostalgia that often surrounds Obama's presidency and refocused attention on the real-world impact of his choices. It was a reminder that legacies are built not on perception, but on the lives affected by policy. The reception of her remarks revealed just how polarizing such candor can be. For some, her words were a welcome dose of honesty, a long overdue acknowledgement of uncomfortable truths. For others, it was seen as a betrayal, an unnecessary attack on a leader still admired by many. This divide underscored the power of Obama's enduring image and the difficulty of challenging it. Yet the very intensity of the reaction showed the importance of what Gabbard had done. By forcing the conversation into uncomfortable territory, she ensured that the flaws of his presidency could not be glossed over in the haze of nostalgia. As the dust settled, the implications of Gabbard's attack continued to ripple outward. It was not a passing moment, but one that highlighted the fragility of political legacies and the necessity of accountability. Obama's time in charge had been marked by a balance of idealism and pragmatism, but Gabbard's dismantling of that narrative reminded everyone that history cannot be judged solely by intentions. It must be measured by outcomes, and in her view, those outcomes told a story far different from the one many preferred to believe. Her intervention, therefore, was not just a political statement, but a call to re-examine the very way leaders are remembered. Her words carried weight because they cut against the grain of conventional political discourse. Instead of deferring to the established reverence, she chose confrontation. Instead of celebrating symbolism, she insisted on substance. The power of that approach was not only in the critique itself, but in the courage it took to deliver it. In doing so, Gabbard demonstrated that political dialogue need not be confined to platitudes and safe commentary. It could instead be direct, unflinching, and unapologetically honest. That in itself was a significant contribution to the political conversation. By dismantling Obama's record so thoroughly, Gabbard also raised the question of how future leaders would be judged. Would they too be allowed to retreat into myth once they left office? Or would they be held accountable for the realities of their decisions? Her intervention suggested that the latter was both necessary and inevitable. Leaders may craft their images, but those images can be challenged, reshaped, and dismantled when confronted with truth. The importance of her critique lay not only in its immediate impact, but in the precedent it set for how political legacies are scrutinized. The episode revealed the tension between narrative and reality, between the stories leaders tell and the lives their decisions affect. Obama had mastered the art of narrative, but Gabbard forced a reckoning with the reality behind it. Her dismantling of his record exposed the cracks in that carefully constructed image and reminded everyone that leadership is not measured in speeches, but in outcome. It was a moment that stripped away illusions and demanded a harder, more honest look at power. And in doing so, it left an indelible mark on the conversation about what it means to truly lead. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Tulsi calling out Obama? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.